Welcome to Property Quorum. Once again, we're joined by the stalwarts of Property Quorum, of course, standing there resplendent, or sitting there resplendent, Hamish McClay, of course, Chris Gilsenan and Juliet Baboolal, Juliet of Gunner Cook, Chris Gilsenan of Root Home, Hamish McClay of Search and Convey. And today, as usual, we are debating and chatting through a topic which seems to be on the lips of many. It's called Bridging the Gap, Shortage to Solution in the Property Sector. And of course, as is traditional on this channel, I'm throwing Hamish straight under the bus.
Well, good morning to you all. Glorious sunshine. So there's not a shortage of sunshine at this moment in time. However, here in Bicester, we have a shortage of all sorts of things. Roads in that you don't get sort of snarled up on, I think. The big challenge we have here, because there's masses of building going on. However, the industry itself is suffering quite significantly from a vast number of shortages for all sorts of different reasons. The tragedy of it is, it's not something that's happened overnight. It's sort of something which has been with us for some time. So the industry, so the sector itself, has actually over time been contributing to this very, very challenge for one reason and another. It doesn't necessarily mean that certain parts are more responsible than others, but when we actually sort of look at it from the perspective of, from Juliet's side of things, when we look at it from the legal perspective, there have been a number of people who leaving the industry who were specialists with property law. A good reason for that. I mean, there's part of it, of course, you're going to have your natural wastage. You're going to have actually people sort of leaving because they've got to the age they thought, right, now's the time to retire. Well, I've got the bloody heck, that's getting too complicated. I'm getting the heck out of here. But there's all sorts of other things going in. There's a big transformation going on because of regulation relative to sort of letting agents now. There's an awful lot of those, a little bit sort of undecided. We're desperately short of the social housing for a vast number of reasons. We just cannot sort of keep up with it. Wherever we look, there is a shortage. However, we cannot wait for regulation to actually sort of dive in and restore whatever, because every week there seems to be some mammoth sort of rhetoric sort of coming from the government, mostly to do with sort of property. I mean, this week we've had the Grenfell thing. I mean, how long has that been going on? We're into the 8th year now.
I'm sure it was started in the 1800s sometime. It seems to have been rolling on forever.
Again, whether it be remediation or anything else is being set up to restore people's sort of faith there. That's another few years down the road before we look at it. I do believe that there are ways that we can, as individuals, and Chris is one of the ones who would explain this, there's always opportunity anyway. Unfortunately, Juliet has to pick up the arm because she's got to get. We've got this big bundle at the moment, sort of coming together because of the situation we have with the stamp duty, and I mean that's just over 28 days away now, so that's not exactly sort of helping things because that isn't helping a smooth flow either. So it's really trying to find ways to suit the era that we're in, to find the best way out. And I guess it's a matter of saying, well, what can we look at first to actually get us moving in the area that we're working?
Well, look, I'm going to jump straight across to Juliet. Juliet, are you noticing extra pressure from people departing the industry? Is there a big shake-up going on? Or as Hamish said, has it been a long time coming?
A mixture of both. I mean, people come of age and they retire. That's just part of life, I guess. But then you've got the new ones coming in who are, equally as hungry and can service the industry. The reality is there are shortages. Plugging the gaps, as we've always said, it's important to take a true picture of where these shortages are coming from. In the construction industry, you've got shortages of staff. So whether that's stemmed from Brexit or otherwise, is something that needs to be addressed. There's a shortage of material. So now you'll find that one of the ways of bridging the gap is on a construction contract, instead of being very particular as to the materials that you're going to use on the project, you're very broad so that you can source alternatives if you need to when the project doesn't come to a standstill. So there are ways around it, but it's tricky. And I think as long as you've got people who don't quite understand the industry, we talk about shortages in the planning departments of local authorities. Well, that needs to be fixed. Is it that someone mentioned previously, let's use AI, let's use some level of technology that can help the planning game, help push things through a lot quicker. You've got the land registry shortages where there's shortages of staff. If you call the land registry on a Friday, their line is closed. There's no, oh my gosh, I forgot to call on Thursday, let me call on Friday. You've got to wait until Monday. So, that's a shortage. How do you plug that gap? Do you get more sort of bots on the land registry's website so you can get onto, a chat, a digital chat where you can ask certain questions, get updates? How do you fix that? Back in the day, we never had that. A Friday land registry not working. If it's a business day, they should be working. So there's a whole host of things that needs to be reviewed, but it needs to be reviewed by people who actually understand the situation, the problem, and understand the consequences of those problems. Otherwise, the people that are within our government, etc., just blame it on the previous government and say, well, we've inherited this and we're now trying to fix it, which is not a solution.
No, it is an old trope, though, isn't it, Juliet?
Yeah, it's time that we get as consumers credence for being, clever. We're the ones in this game of life having to deal with the consequences of decisions that people make. And enough is enough where we're pawns in people's games, being pushed around left, right, and center, having to pick up pieces. So you've got people, you've got solicitors. If you look at statistically how many psychologists or professionals in the sort of corporate UK have gone to psychologists because of stress-related problems, because of a trickle down of something that's happened in legislation, it is probably at an all-time high. So, on the one hand, you're on the surface saying, well, I'm doing this and I have to cut savings. I have to ensure that I get clawback money from your savings, etc. And what's happening, because the economy isn't changing, the cost of living hasn't changed, it's increased, yet you're trying to tax us to the nines. And what's happening? We're getting a brain drain. People are leaving this country. It's not just the retiring, it's people saying, look, I've had enough of your tax system. I'm moving to Panama where I haven't got to deal with this nonsense. So they're losing talented people. They're losing investment into the country because people are, it's almost as if you're being punished for investing in. And that needs to be looked at. Otherwise, we're looking at a falling Britain, and it's a really, really sad day when that happens. And it doesn't happen overnight, which means that there are checks and balances that can be put in place to curb or, change the trajectory of where we're going. And that's important.
Wow, Juliet, I wasn't expecting a diatribe, but I quite enjoyed it. Chris, Panama soon to be renamed Trump Towers Panama, I believe. But anyway, moving on. As has been mentioned earlier, you would notice of all if there's been a vast slant downwards in the provision of social housing, and we've talked about it ourselves on our own channels. Is there any prospect of that changing? I mean, I can't see where they're going to find the money.
There seems to be a downward slope.
All the manpower.
Well, I think the manpower is there. I think the desire to actually address it seems to be pretty lackluster. That's the disappointing element. If you take a holistic view, a really high level view of what's going on and where all the holes are, you can see that they're everywhere. And however, it comes down to our individual ability to address those holes and the desire to actually get those dealt with. From my own business perspective, I see challenges all over the place, and it's how I then go about those. And if I have any ability and time and resource to plug those holes, I will do that. I will allocate those resources. But I don't see that happening across industry.
But hang on a moment. Didn't the Starmer bot say that there were going to be all these new houses built? And so, are you saying he spake with forked tongue?
I think he's fake news, but whatever.
Gosh, no, not the rise of fake
they've
news.
come in on a lie, haven't they? So they've not even got close to doing what they've said they're going to do. Actions speak louder than words, and being their most fundamental manifesto promise, they need to be held to account on that one. But let's see what happens. They've still got a little bit of time before.
I also remember them saying they weren't going to tax the poor unduly, and yet suddenly a bunch of them don't have any winter fuel allowance.
It won't be long until people arrive with the pitchforks, hopefully, but we'll see. But yeah, in terms of the bridging the gap, it depends on what the gap is. So I see gaps everywhere, not just in my own business, but also in the systems that I operate within. So, for example, I was having a conversation between a local authority and a charity the other day who we're trying to do some collaboration with, and there's a funding gap there. So the local authority, they have a requirement for housing for general needs. But because the margins are so tight, and because there's only a facility to provide the people who need that housing with just basic housing level and basic universal credit, the margins are so tight. It's like, well, how can we deliver housing, or where do we fit into this to be able to deliver housing and cooperate with this charity and then provide a service to these people that are in need to get them off the streets? Surely there must be some give and take, and from the local authorities' perspective, their hands are bound because all the money comes from the consolidated fund and the central government. And it's like, well, that's all dictated. They have frameworks to work within. There is literally no wiggle room for them. So it's kind of over to you, the private sector. You deal with it somehow. You figure out how it works. So there's challenges everywhere, and it's that desire to address those sorts of challenges that occur, that where people do fall down the quite obvious gaps that exist in the system, and where there are quite simple solutions, but there needs to be a bit more autonomy. There needs to be some flexibility, not this black and whiteness that seems to prevail across the system. Now, I remember
it does seem a one size fits all approach doesn't, surprise, doesn't seem to be the way to go.
So going back to funding gaps, I'm not sure how long I've been in this now. So I'm going back to around the credit crunch time, and off the back of what happened, then all the lenders they kind of closed their lending books, and off the back of that, it decimated the surveyor industry. So the impact was they didn't have any work, and they either went on to do other things or they went to retire. And then the following years after that, the surveyors that came onto the scene, they were very black and white because they were brand new and they had to follow all the instructions, and there was no autonomy, there was no thinking in what was happening, and the impact of that was massive down valuations. Now, I appreciate part of that is the instruction that the bank is giving them. Don't give them too much based on what happened pre-2008. But the restrictions and the lack of autonomous thinking was a challenge for a number of years, and I'm sure that that definitely has improved over the last couple of years. But again, a similar situation with a knowledge gap was 2020. Again, lots of the lenders kind of closed their books and laid off a load of underwriters, and then obviously then all the underwriters, then there was a requirement to start the lending up again, and then the fresh underwriters that came in, because they're quite fresh, there's that rigidity, that lack of autonomy in their thinking, and that had additional impacts combined with lots of other increasing regulation. But yeah, I see these gaps happening all the time, and because of these circular motions of the markets, we kind of kick ourselves in the teeth quite a lot because of things that happen. But they are fixable, they are addressable if there's the desire to address these problems. So, but the biggest challenge that I see is some of the institutional issues that are much higher level, that we don't seem to have anyone who wants to step up and address these challenges, or us at the grassroots level. We don't have a structure to kind of hold people to account, because the people at the top seem to be doing what the hell they want.
Right. Hamish, is there no end to this madness, sir?
And I think what's sort of interesting from what Chris says, and I mean, this comes through. it's being able to think. It's being able to be sort of creative, and in sort of some ways we have. It's the way that authority operates, and we sort of have this sort of perspective, I guess, through sort of lockdown to suggest, well, it's all right. If we say you've got to stay inside your house, you've got to stay inside your house. So that's taken away free thought immediately. Well, what am I going to do? I'll go into this room now. And I mean, basically, even your movements are restricted. But we do have far too much regulation. We do have far too much governmental sort of imposition, which does restrict an element of sort of free thinking in terms of what we do. And of course, we do need that backup. We need that level of experience. And I think that's something which Chris, I think, put forward quite effectively. And also, it was that aspect of what Juliet said, because if we don't have experienced people trying to carry out work, they are in a very, very fixed position. They can't see their way through it. And from Juliet's perspective and the type of work that she does, as a consequence of that, if you have people coming in who haven't had the background, haven't had the full training, haven't had the full experience, they come up with a query. So they have to push that query back to somebody that can answer the query. Now, rather than actually doing it internally, they'll very often throw it back to somebody on the opposite side of what's going on within the whole transaction. And that in itself slows things. So there's a shortage. There is the skill factor, right, almost throughout where we go, is a very, very significant contribution to the position we find ourselves in. But it's allowing people. The trouble is, in a way, we've got so much pressure in certain aspects at the moment, particularly with sort of stamp duties and things. It doesn't. I guess it's going to apply to Chris as well, because he's got to wade through that to get involved with his. Because he's outside of that side of things to a certain extent, because he's working on supporting the housing shortage. And you think, well, that doesn't impact regulatory, but it does, because anything that he's trying to get through from a normal perspective is held up because we've got this big funnel at the moment. And as Juliet said, if you've got land reg, you see that shunning door. I didn't realise. That's a new one on me. I didn't realise they closed.
Oh my goodness. I wondered why you looked wide-eyed when she said that. That's craziness. Yes, it's crazy. We'll be having it so that when you ring up the hospital to try and get someone to help you, I'm sorry, we're on half day at the moment. Would you mind calling back on Monday? Look, I've said it before. We live in a crazy world where the frustrating thing is you can see where the light should be at the end of the tunnel, but you're not quite sure whether it's an oncoming train. All I would say to everyone out there is be assured that if you stick with the right people, with the right information, you're more likely to get the best result. I've banged this drum before, but it rings so true. In all the other work that I do with Hamish, including Ipsa Kind of Magic, it's patently obvious. You deal with people with local knowledge, with absolutely boots on the ground, as it were, then you're more likely to get a result that is applicable to all, that makes sense. At the moment, there seems to be the rise of this this factory, you one size fits all approach, and I think it will do the opposite of paying dividends very soon. Let me thank everyone that's attended today. Hamish, thank you so much for putting this on. Slightly doom and gloom at the moment. Don't worry, guys. Good news is just around the corner, I've been told. Juliet Baboolal of Gunner Cook, of course, always the great legal brains that we have, and Chris Gilsenan, facing at the coalface as he is, Route Home. Be noted that Route Home and Chris have a special interest in working with the beleaguered social housing sector. And if you have any comments or concepts, please throw them at him, because he's always interested in that type of thing. Until next week, thank you everyone for attending. Try and keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the sun, the stars, and the moon, and look after that mental health. Until next time, goodbye.